Hi, am I audible? Assume I am. Good evening. Many centuries after the word Dharma was coined, it is still at the heart of our knowledge systems. It is still the way we measure ourselves and the world that we inhabit. And today we have an occasion to talk about this same subject because we have a book here, a brilliant new book on the subject of Dharma, which you can see here on the side. And at the formal release of this book, there are going to be 100 questions that come up about what is Dharma, what and why do we need to still talk about it, and what does it mean anyway? I'm just going to check if there are any, okay, no problems there, we're still live. I'd like to invite our chief guest today for the launch, Ms. Smriti Irani, who, as we all know, is the Union Minister of Textiles and the Minister for Child and Women Development. She is here to be in conversation with and engage with the writers of this book and to formally release the book to the world. Thank you very much, Smriti ji, for joining us today. We know you've taken time off from a really busy day, but it just feels right that you are the one who's going to do this with us today. To engage with her and to speak about the book are the writers of this book. Amish, who, as we all know again, is the mega best-selling writer of the Shiva trilogy and also the Ramchandra series, and is also currently the director in London of the Nehru Center. His co-author on the book is Bhavna, the first collaboration between them in a professional capacity, as he chose to remind us. She is his sister, and she has written this book with him, conceptualized this with him. And so in every possible way, this is a true collaboration. I thought when we start talking about this and we discuss the book, the first thing, let's get the conversation started with the structure of this book. This is the most unusual book for a writer of fiction to have come up with. It is also a most unusual book for a collaboration. At the same time, it is really fitting because it's also shaped in the conversation of dialogues and conversations. And so let's start by trying to understand why the structure, why this form, and how did this idea come about? On the basis of that, I think the conversation that follows will be much clearer. Would you like to get going with this, Bhavna, Amish, whoever would like to start?
Didi should start. Bhavna Di.
Okay.
This book really began around 2014-15 over a dinner conversation, family dinner conversation. We were conversing about idol worship, actually. The meaning of idol worship, the purpose of idol worship. It's viewed as intra-dig somehow, not very sophisticated. It's an unsubtle form of worship. Considered so today. And we were trying to examine the philosophical basis of Murti Pujan. From there, the conversation shifted to karma and dharma. And there was this riveting, sentences being thrown from all over the place, all directions. And then my brother Amish said, why don't the two of you, Amish and Bhavna, write on this, because we had started talking about the Mahabharata at the time. We had started talking about Amish's Meluha and Nagas, had been released at the time. Even Vayu Pujas, I think.
Yes.
And And so, I began on the project and I wrote around 15 to 20 pages. Amish was in Mumbai at the time. And I sent it to Amish. And yes, I have bullied Amish in childhood. He's 8 years younger. He's my bacha. And so his feedback, when he had to give it to me, he was very gingerly. He was appropriate, but also honest,
Okay.
non-brutal fashion. And he said, Didi, बहुत theoretical hai. It's very, it's not readable. It's not relatable. So I said, ठीक है, क्या करूं? he said, "You let me work on it now." And then it is Amish magic, because he converted that treatise of mine, that theoretical treatise of mine, into conversations. So he brought in these characters, the old couple, Dharmaraj and Lopamudra Deshpande, their daughter Gargi, son-in-law Nachiket Sawant. So he created this, lovely family unit, and their characters, and this entire thing was, reject into conversations. Sent it back to me, and I was riveted. I worked more, and then I sent it back to him, and then he worked on it, and then really it went into cold storage. During COVID time, he called me up and said, "Didi, come on, let's do some finishing touches and, put the show on the road." And here we are.
So, Amish, why did you choose a family unit, and why these particular people set in this particular sort of situation? The son-in-law coming to the father-in-law. Are there relationships that you were also trying to discuss through this?
Conversations are at the heart of the way we ancient Indians discuss our philosophies. I remember I met Smriti ji at a conference in Goa, and we were speaking of how interestingly, most of the Upanishads have been structured like conversations. They are not pure, kind of stream of consciousness, the divine speaking to you. They're structured as conversations, right? Most of the Upanishads. And, one of the things that we discussed is essentially that makes it easier to understand, because you can put tark, vitark, you can put point, counterpoint, and therefore you get a little deeper understanding of the philosophies. And that's what it is at its heart, right? I remember Smriti ji telling me this. We'd met at a conference in Goa, I remember the first time. And she said, actually, because the entire point of philosophy is not something to just kind of just mull in your mind. What's the point of that? You have to apply it in your life, right? And that's where these conversations help, because you see characters. And so, I mean, I don't think the credit, should be given here. The credit should be given to our ancestors who came up with this lovely format of looking at philosophies.
Yeah. Smriti ji, you would like to step in here to tell us what conversation means to you. I mean, you're a public figure. There must be many kinds of conversations that happen in your life. What does that lead to? Debate, confrontation, or also philosophy?
I think the very quintessential characteristic of our culture has been based on ideas which are contextualized from our old way of life, are embedded in some cultural identities or dialogues that we have heard over a period of time. But conversations in the present actually help us ideate from a new perspective. And that's exactly what Amish possibly is referring to. I think that in the opening remarks, Bhavna ji spoke about how she wrote a very, very theological prospect on, let's say, the impact of idol worship, or how certain shastras might have been viewed by her. And Amish gave it a real life conversational spin. It is important from two contexts as far as I'm concerned. Firstly, when you talk about the very meaning of dharma, there is many conversations that have stemmed from the prejudice that धर्म के बारे में अगर आपको चर्चा करनी है तो आपके पास जीवन में इतनी उपलब्धि अथवा इतना एक्सपीरियंस होना चाहिए. I think that when Amish or this collaboration with Bhavna ji has come into being, it basically makes these meaningful conversations possible for the young as well. Because there has been a time in our civilization, and today when we talk about civilizationally how India has been, how Bharat has been, where there was a presumption कि धर्म की बात अगर करनी है, धर्म पे अगर रिफ्लेक्ट करना है, तो बाल बिल्कुल सफेद होने चाहिए, आपने जीवन भर संघर्ष किया हो, शास्त्र पढ़ा हो. तो I think bringing the Indian civilizational values closer to the young, I think is a part of the reflections of this book, for which I'm extremely joyous about. The second aspect, which I find from a modern day context in terms of conversations, is there is a presumption that when we talk about dharmic conversations, it is normally passed on from father to son, from mother to daughter. I think to juxtaposition it in a modern family unit in India, where a son-in-law and a father-in-law enter into a dialogue, I think that also is extremely unique, because हमारे यहाँ पर ये सोच ये थी कि परंपरा ये है कि या तो गुरु शिष्य को बताए, या बेटे को पिता से प्राप्त हो, या माँ बताए. So there was also a gender concept, a silo of how dharma or such knowledge is to be transmitted through generations. So I think that is the beauty of what Amisha and Bhavna ji present today, that in the modern context, our civilizational values are such that they resonate even today in these modern structures, and they can find value in terms of conversations. These are not written in stone so that it cannot help you today to possibly make your life better. As Amish said, कि philosophy हमारी जो है, या हमारी जो civilizational value है, वो सिर्फ पन्नों तक सीमित नहीं है. जीवन का आधार है, जीवन के मूल्यों में इंगित है, इसीलिए हमारे लिए आज भी हमारी धार्मिक व्यवस्था जीवंत है. It's alive even today as we speak, because it's these deliberations. शास्त्रार्थ कहते थे एक जमाने में उसको, कि सब बैठ के चर्चा करते थे शास्त्र के ऊपर. So this is a modern day version of that kind of discussion and deliberation on shastra or the concept of dharma.
Right. So that brings me to the other aspect, which is the free-flowing nature of fiction, mythology, history, non-fiction, whatever you want to call it. When we were trying to package this book for the reader, for the book marketplace, we were thinking, is this fiction or is this non-fiction? I mean, there is a scaffolding of fiction because these characters have been made up by the writers. But what they're talking about has come to us from ages ago and is now part of the way we are. So is that non-fiction then? And so tell us about that interplay, Amish. Where do you draw the lines and how do you cross the boundaries between one thing and the other to present one cohesive work which combines everything?
You know, this genre classification of fiction, non-fiction is more a Western construct. It's like how Westerners also try and say mythology and history, which is again a Western construct. The way ancient Indians looked at texts was, if it gave you knowledge, it gave you knowledge. Knowledge could come from a story. Knowledge could also come from pure philosophical text as well. And the genre itself is not important. It's what you learn from it that's important. So one of the key things that is worth remembering is Vedvyas ji, who composed the Mahabharata. Vedvyas is actually a title. It's not a name. So every age has its own Vedvyas. So the name of the Vedvyas of our age was actually Krishna Dwaipayam. Right? And he got the title Vedvyas because he compiled the Vedas, Vedvyas. And hence he got the title Vedvyas for our age. So he compiled the Vedas as well. And the belief goes that he realized that while the Vedas are very important, they're very difficult for most people to understand. So he then, that's why sometimes Mahabharata is called the fifth Veda, because he composed the story to convey the philosophies of the Vedas in a very interesting story. I mean, Mahabharata, you can't put it down. It is the page turner of page turners, right?
Yeah.
But while reading that story, you imbibe the philosophies of the Vedas. Vedvyas ji composed the Mahapuranas as well, the 18 Mahapuranas. So he was clearly very productive, the most productive among writers ever. But that's the point, that classifying into these genres is more a modern Western construct. It doesn't matter in the ancient Indian way. The thing is, can you learn something? If you can learn something, read it. Who cares what genre it is? Who cares who wrote it? All those things, it doesn't matter. So one of the things to note, the composers of our seminal epics, Ramayana and Mahabharata, they were not born Brahmins, Valmiki ji or Vedyas ji. It doesn't matter where you were born, what happened. What mattered is, had Goddess Saraswati blessed you. If she blessed you, there's something to learn.
Okay. So looking at that idea of fiction again from a different point of view then, is there a story, and I'm going to come to you with this question, Bhavna, just in a bit, but I want Amish to tell us that one story in the book that possibly captures the essence of Dharma and the conflict of Dharma, the lion and the deer.
The lion and the deer. I thought you would speak about Draupadi.
वो बाद में करेंगे ना, अभी तो पहले let's get first.
Okay, the lion and the
Amish is
deer.
trying to give away a raz which I will not allow him to do.
I'm
That
very
too in the
discreet.
presence of Karthika. So my lips are sealed, and that is of the editor.
Okay, so let's go to the lion then.
The lion and the deer. This story is in the Ravan book, Ravan Enemy of Aryavarta, which is the third book of the Ramchandra series. And the story is being told to Ravan by Vedvati, the one he looks up to, the one who was his chance perhaps at maybe using his capabilities for good. But unfortunately, that didn't work out for him. But in any case, Vedvati tells him a story of a hunt that she'd seen, of a lion, a male lion, who'd obviously been beaten out of his pride, and his cubs, his children. What happens often is if a lion of a pride is challenged by another lion, then that lion has to run away, and the cubs of that lion are usually killed by the lion that takes over. This actually happens in the jungles. And then the new lion takes over the pride. Now, this was an old lion who clearly lost his pride, and he had escaped with his cubs, and the cubs were starving, and he was a father whose dharma it is to feed his children, right? And then he sees a mother deer across the field, a doe, and the mother deer has her children, and her dharma is to protect her children. And the lion, on seeing the children, because the children would be easier to hunt, one of them is a runt, starts chasing, and the mother deer realizes that her runt child will probably not survive, so she slows down, right? And in a way willing to sacrifice herself to save her children. The lion then realizes that the mother is a much bigger deer. I can feed my children for longer. And so therefore he stops chasing the runt children and chases the mother deer. And the mother deer comes to a stop, right? Again, willing to sacrifice herself to save her children, which was her dharma. And the lion also comes to a stop, almost confused that why has the mother deer stopped? And then what Vedvati tells Ravan is that what should the lion do? What does Dharma say? Should he be a good father and kill the mother deer to feed his starving children? Or should he be a noble soul and give life to a magnificent mother? What does Dharma say? And the answer is it's complicated, right? And that's the thing with Dharma, is it's not so much about what you do. Often it is about why you do what you do. If the mother deer had just sacrificed her life because she was cowardly, that's adharma. But she sacrifices her life to save her children, that is dharma. Now, if the father lion is killing just for pleasure, that is adharma. But if he's killing to feed his starving children, which is his duty as a father, that is dharma. So often why you do something that you do is more important than what you're doing. And this is deep in the Indian way, because in the Indian way, the way our ancestors, saw it and formulated it, they told all of us, they treated us like adults, not like children. They didn't tell us, do this, otherwise you'll go to hell. Then like you're treating someone like a child, right? They treated us like adults, that these are the situations, these are the various philosophies. Now think and do what you think is right. And reap the consequences, positive or negative. So we were treated like adults. That's what dharma is, and that's what this story tries to get across through the example of animals. And we discussed this in this book, Dharma.
Right. Correct. So leading on from there, okay. I'm going to take that onward to Bhavna to talk about choice. I mean, clearly, this is a choice that we are talking about. Do you want to take this path or that path? And in that choice making, we come to the story that you referred to earlier, which is one of my favorite stories in the book, which is of Gandhari. Gandhari made a choice to blindfold herself. And I'm not even getting into the backstory because I'm assuming most everyone who's listening knows the story. But she chose to blindfold herself. And for the longest time, in as many commentaries as I've come across, it was all about her great sacrifice and how she gave up her own life and pleasures in order to be by this blind husband of hers. Now, what you both are doing in your book is saying, seriously, is that the best thing she could have done? Is that a right choice for someone to make? Should she have stood by her husband in a different way, perhaps, and made a choice that would have changed the course of the future? Bhavna, tell us what you think about this and what you did with that in the book itself.
So the way we are examining, the approach to dharma it's about your inner life. What has to happen will happen regardless. If the war was meant to happen, then it would have happened. If the Pandavas were meant to win, they would have won regardless. So external life happens regardless. It is the drama that is going on within you that dharma is more deeply interested in. You talk about choices. Actually, we are not one person. We are multiple people inside us. And any choice that we make is actually made through multiple motives. There never is one motive. So yes, there was a conscious motive of Gandhari, which was to stand by her husband. My husband is blind. I will blindfold myself and share, his life experience. But you uncovering your real motives, is actually the thing what life is all about. Often we find that we surprise ourselves. Often we find that we are almost ambushed by ourselves. We find ourselves apologizing to people around us. I'm so sorry. I don't know where that came from. I don't know why I said that. I don't know why I did that. We distance ourselves from that me that I do not like. But that me is really more me than the me I like to imagine is me. And that is the me I have to examine and uncover within the privacy of my own inner life. And it's a brutal experience which requires a great deal of courage. Had Gandhari done that, she would have found herself, asking herself, am I copping out of real responsibilities in life? Am I copping out of my responsibility as a mother, as a wife, indeed as a queen, as the queen of Hastinapur? Am I shirking? Am I hitting out? Is there this malignant aspect within me? Because all of us have that little malignant dot within us, and it would do us good to acquaint ourselves with our own inner ugliness. Was there a malignant aspect within her which was hitting out at the unfairness of having been, tied to this blind man? She wasn't aware that she was being married off to a blind prince. So was there also now? Was Gandhari's motive this or that? Actually, the conundrum of life is that Gandhari's motive probably was this and that and that and that.
Multiplicity, multiple motives, multiple actions, and never to put certitude into anything. That's really what all of this is about, right? Including the idea of dharma. Smritiji, what do you think? I mean, if you had to pick a role model from the epics, a female role model that you would go out and say, look, these were the actions that make sense even now, and you can admire without any doubt, who would that be?
I think that for us to look at choices and become judgmental about it is exactly what Dharma doesn't allow us to do, or hopes that we do not do. The fact that why were our children in a Gurukul taught about the various manifestations of Dharma, taught to deliberate about Dharma, Swadharma, as Amish and Ms. Roy have written about in the book. That's because, as Amish said in his comments, our children were never meant to do something and then consider the repercussions of it. Our children were taught from a very, very young age that behind every position you take, every decision you make, there has to be introspection, various facets of society, relationships, families, and your own choices that you need to consider. And whatever your consideration allows you to make a decision, there is a price to pay, irrespective of whatever becomes an instrument of your consideration. So we have in our family always told our children that God says that the choice is yours, but the price is mine. And that is what Dharma teaches you. It teaches you not to be judgmental about choices, but to be ready for the repercussions. So, given that repercussions can oscillate from mild to none to extreme, you make a choice. And I think that is what Dharma or the Indian way of life is all about. What is fascinating is that we taught our children right from their formative years that everything you do, there is a price to it. It is a cyclic event. It will revisit you at various facets in your life or at various stages of your life. You may want to reconsider your positions once it revisits you, or if you're smart enough and you listen closely to the Shastras or to whatever theologians have to say about Dharma, maybe you will not make a wrong choice to begin with, because there is a cyclic effect that choices have. So I think that is where Dharma or disposition or deliberation of Dharma from an Indian context differs from theological studies from across the world. The fact that you can't be judgmental about choice. Can you actually demean Gandhari for putting a patti on her eyes? That's a choice she makes. So be respectful of choices. The consequences at times are for you to bear alone, and at times, civilizationally, generations pay a price for the decision making of one. I think what is also interesting is that in the book, and I had just read, if you look at the index, the chapters, in fact, the titles of it too are very, very important from today's day and age. If you look at a lot of working professionals who are at a stage in life where they introspect about how working methodologies need to change, and it especially happened post-COVID. A lot of people in lockdown have had a time to reflect on life processes, on working choices, on methodologies as individuals, as organizations. And two very prominent content heads that have come out from the book. One is loyalty is a slippery slope. And second is the price of anger. Now, these are very modern day challenges which have been addressed through ancient text. What I love is a particular line which is in that chapter of loyalty is a slippery slope. That can you distinguish what makes one man more loyal than the other? So, with permission of both the authors, Bhavna and Amish, I would say that they've reflected on Karna and Kumbhakaran. Who's more loyal? Is telling the whole truth, the bitter truth to your friend a sign of loyalty? Or is hiding what the truth is from your friend or from your companion dharma? And I think that reflection today is extremely essential, because in your work life or your personal life, many people say that loyalty is such a virtue that silence is the biggest contributor to that virtue. I'm loyal, hence I will allow adharma to happen. So that I can mollycoddle the person I'm with. So when you take a dharmic stance, there is a severe price to pay for it. Secondly, is the issue of the price of anger. So today, while I spoke about the fact that why do we teach our children dharma in the formative years in a Gurukul system? Because we are asking them to consider consequences, no matter what you do. And one of the consequences of karma today is anger and the price of it. People normally reduce it to work stress, but it is much more. As the book has said, that your cells in your body are an imprint not only of your DNA and your genetic makeup, but it's also an imprint of a psychological makeup, which, as Bhavna said, is not reduced to just this birth. So there is a conversation around it. So why does some incident trigger anger? And some incident, no matter how stressful your workday has been, you're allowed to let it go. So I think those reflections are also extremely interesting.
Yeah. And so I'm going to take it from there to Amish. Will you talk about this? One of the aspects that we're talking about here is then change, right? That there is nothing fixed about these choices or situations. So one of the other very interesting aspects of this book for me was your take on Yudhishthir. I mean, Yudhishthir is the easiest to get after and to say he lost everything. It's all because of him. What is this Dharmaraj who, actually, what is his concept of Dharma that he allows himself to do all these things? But you have a story of change, the two of you. You've come up with this part 1 and part 2 for Yudhishthir. And I think that's a really interesting aspect of the way you think about Dharma. Will you tell us a little about that?
Yeah. I mean, fortunately, you clarified at the end, because it's not just my take, it's Bhavna Di's and my
Yes, of course. I'm assuming everything I say is both of you. So.
But before I speak on Yudhishthir, if I can just very quickly, build a bit on what Smriti ji says on loyalty. Yeah. It's a very, very important point, because we discussed loyalty from the perspective of Parvateshwar as well, from the Shiva trilogy. And for Parvateshwar, it's very easy to be loyal to someone like Lord Shiva, because he's noble. Being loyal to someone who's actually noble and selfless, it's very easy, right? But what if you're, someone like Karna or Kumbhakarna, who's forced to be loyal to someone who's not noble, right? And in that, what is better? Karna, who's almost in denial, never tells Duryodhan the things that a good friend must say. Whereas Kumbhakarna constantly fights with Ravan, constantly tries to improve him, and yet remains loyal. He remains loyal, but at least it's not a blind loyalty. So ideally, of course, if you're lucky enough to be loyal to a noble person, then life is much easier. But if you're unlucky enough to be in to have a sense of loyalty, a sense of love towards someone who's not noble, how should you behave? I think that's a very, very important point. The thing on change, one of the things Didi and I realized, Yudhishthir is a classic part 1, part 2 character. Because his part 1, he speaks very highly of dharma, of morality. But his actions often do not measure up to his own talk. We see many people like that in the modern day. We call them, virtue signaling, or woke. And people who'll talk a very good game. They'll come up, on Twitter and say some, I'm so noble. But when you see their actions, are their actions actually as noble? Whereas Yudhishthir in part 2, you notice he focuses a lot more on his actions, not just on talking. And then when you focus on actions, you actually start realizing life is far more difficult than someone who's just virtue signaling can say, because only someone who's virtue signaling can see the world in simplistic black and white. The world is very complex, right? So, and we speak of what Yudhishthir does, when Dronacharya has to die, he lies basically, right? When he says Ashwatthama dies, when he knows he's lying, but he's doing it for the greater good, and he knows he will get a sin on his soul, but he still does it for greater good. So when you start doing actions, you become a lot more nuanced about life, and you realize your task is to improve the world a little bit, rather than just talking a good game and saying, oh, look at me, I'm so special. So Yudhishthir, in our opinion, improves dramatically in the second half, in this part 2 character, where he doesn't talk so much, but he does a lot more. Sorry, Smriti, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just want to say that you see the complication emanates from the fact that in your formative years, you're always taught black and white.
Yeah.
Right.
You are taught
Yeah.
कि अच्छा है तो it's white, बुरा है तो it's black. And suddenly when you come into your own cycle of doing karma, where you're responsible yourself, you slowly grow into systems where you realize it's not all black and white. And I think that's where the dharmic conflict begins. Because you've been taught to take those obstinate positions between black and white. You are never taught the element of gray.
Yeah.
And how dharma hopes, and it doesn't impose, but hopes you will behave because you've learned the complexities of dharma from a very young age. So I think most people struggle when they come to that point in their lives where they realize that yes, it's not black and white. And they suddenly realize that it's okay to also delve into the gray. So there is a lot of spiritual conflict then they become a part of. And I hope that the second book the brother and sister write together is about that conflict, is about that gray. Because most of our writings are about that black or the white, more about the white. But if you contextualize dharma in today's world, that is the difficulty that a lot of people have personally.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that when you talk in this chapter about dharma and swadharma, I hope that the next book actually reflects on that aspect.
True. The
Because there is
complexity
a huge amount of guilt for people who have lived in the silo of white to even consider the gray.
Oh, that's a very deep thing to say, and that is true. You find people swinging between guilt and obsession, and often you'll find the worst crimes in humanity often have been done by those who are so convinced of their morality. You know, among the worst crimes, I mean, the crimes of Pol Pot, for example, he was convinced that he was creating a better society. You know, and he killed
So that's book 2.
Yeah, 15% of his country's population. It's bizarre, but he was convinced of the morality of his actions.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is actually a good point again for us to talk about the character that we brought up earlier, which is the Draupadi and the relationship she has with her different men, and most beautifully with Bhima. And that conviction that she has, that in his love for her, his commitment to her, as opposed to almost everybody else there, and all the things that happened to her because of her relationship with him, with Krishna, with Yudhishthira, everybody, she's central to the epic in a way that nobody else is. I think it's a good time to talk about her and what she means perhaps to us now, and why we continue to go back. Draupadi, Sita, Sita, Draupadi. I mean, it's like every woman is defined by this or that or somewhere in between. Why do we need to go back centuries for these models? What is wrong with us that we cannot create anymore these stories or these kinds of perennial interest stories that we need to keep harking back to the back? Is that a
Because they were
problem?
not
Or
stories,
do you
they
think
were
that is a
ways of life.
positive?
You
I
see,
guess
when you
that's
context, when you talk about it being stories, there is a belief that it's a myth which was created.
Yeah.
And that is why
But-
you're hoping that a myth can be recreated. And you have never even considered that what we consider to be real and Bhagwan and Pujaniya, you can't recreate God. You can hope to get closer to God and a godlike element. So when you look at possibly Draupadi, which Karthika, you've really been egging me to kind of bite the bait,
because
which
I
I
know you
finally
have
bitten.
feelings for her. So tell us what your
And I'm
feelings for
hoping,
her.
and there will be an appropriate announcement at the given time. But I think that let's look at it from this point of view. When you talk about only Draupadi and Sita, and you talk about why don't we create it again, that means it emanates from your belief that it was a myth that was created on paper or a manuscript. And I think Bhavna ji and Amish have done enough research to counter that position. But I also feel that for us, whoever believes in this way of life, and that's why I say for us, for us, it's about what did they imbibe, what did they manifest. So in the bibliography, Amish makes a reference to another author who's written on Sita. And I had read that book on Sita. And I remember one of the lines that really stunned me was when Sita was being left in the forest by Lakshman. And she turns to him and she says, "Do you think he abandoned me?" He did not. I can never be abandoned. I think that when you look at Draupadi, and when I spoke about the impact psychological on ourselves, as both the authors have written in this book, that there are some things that strike us as odd because there is some kind of memory in us about those incidents. I have a friend, Jayashree Barman, who's a very, very renowned painter. And she and I discussed 12 themes around Draupadi. And she painted 12 magnificent paintings about Draupadi. One of the paintings was sold to somebody in New York, which are an emancipated lot considered by some, as compared to us mere Indians who reside in this beautiful country. And Jayashree's experience was so astounding that 3 months later, that gentleman came back and said that I don't want to take the money back, but I'd like to return the painting. When Jayashree said, "Why?" She said, "जब से मैंने उसको ड्राइंग रूम में लगाया है, my mother says कि घर में झगड़े बन गए हैं क्योंकि द्रौपदी की चित्र आई है घर में." So can you imagine the narratives which are baseless at times are woven around characters? The fact that they can manifest themselves in modern day world in areas which are, like I said, culturally considered emancipated by people who have rich coffers, just tells you the impact of these stories, of these characters, as you call it, but of these godlike creatures, figures in our life, that somebody would be so scared of just a painting, saying ki kalesh hoga, isko hataiye. So I think that we are in our conversations trying to possibly simplistically look at the narrative, but there are psychological impacts of all the scriptures which are generation after generation seen. And it's not reduced. It's not reduced to the female characters. Today you talk about Yudhishthir. Amish talks about Karna. I think the modern day context of putting the male characters under the lens is also equally interesting. Because there was a time nobody would talk about the complexity of Yudhishthir's character. धर्मराज है, उसके ऊपर चर्चा नहीं होगी, विषय समाप्त. The fact that when you have books such as this, which say contextualize every character from the prism of dharma, from the prism of karma, from the prism of dialogue and its impact thereafter, I think that's what makes these conversations very, very meaningful and fruitful. That this is not the end. This is just the beginning of a new chapter of dialogue in a civilization as old as ours.
Wow.
Yeah. So
very
that's actually a really good point to bring up the fact that the way you talk about these characters.
May I add something to this? May I add something to this? Because just adding, and I'm sure Didi will agree with this, adding on something on what Smriti ji says, because one of the things sadly we've forgotten in the relatively recent past, maybe just 100, 200 years, is that our way, our ancient way was not belief. Our ancient way was seeking and debate. That was our ancient way. So when we looked at our, at our gods and goddesses, we sought to learn from them and then apply lessons in our own life. And that has been for various reasons, the invasions, first the Turks, then the Europeans, we lost our confidence. So, it doesn't mean that just because we have faith doesn't mean that we won't question. And those things have got forgotten, and that's what needs to be revived. That's what our ancestors would have loved us to do, to seek, to learn, and then apply in our own lives. There's something to be learned from all these wondrous, we're the only pre-Bronze Age culture that is still alive. every other pre-Bronze Age culture is dead. Because, and a large part of our culture is our stories. There are various other things, of course, the food, the clothes, our rituals, but a large part is our stories. The stories still mean so much to us, which is why they're still alive. And the entire perspective is to learn from those stories, not just hear them, learn from them, and then apply in your own life.
Just to extend that, Karthika, I think that we are also taught कि भगवान अवतरित हुए. So God took an avatar and came to this earth to teach us something. And that is why when we say that we believe in this, it's because we were taught that because things came to such a pass, that people needed to take a step back, reflect, and then move forward. एक युग से दूसरे युग. तो भगवान अवतरित हुए, उन्होंने मनुष्य का रूप धारण किया. उसके बाद भगवान से भी मनुष्य के रूप में जो हुआ, वो धर्म का हिस्सा बनता गया. क्योंकि भगवान कभी भी मरते नहीं हैं. लेकिन कृष्ण की एड़ी पर बाण लगा. भगवान कभी भी मरते नहीं हैं, लेकिन सीता धरती में समाई. So I think that the fact that these were the very, very foundations of our learnings, that yes, every time we as humans, we as a planet, we as a civilization come to such a crossroad, God will come and teach us which path to take, which is least destructive, or if you choose the path that is destructive, then learn the consequences of it. That is Dharma. God comes only to transmit that knowledge. And as I said, the choice is yours. The price is mine.
Yeah. So I want to just take this to Bhavna. When you talked about Draupadi and what she stands for, etc. That is one of the points that you make in the book, that Kurukshetra is a battlefield, but it's not necessarily a physical battlefield. It's also a battlefield inside the mind, and the mind itself is a battlefield. And each of these is actually, you have to think about them as qualities, and that is the way in which you can get the most out of myth, right? So do you want to talk a little bit about that, Bhavna?
These, Smriti ji said that, at one level, are they myths, are they stories, or are they reality, are they the truth? Now, you move beyond and you ask yourself, what is truth? Is truth the truth of facts, or is truth the truth of intention, the truth of learning, the truth of wisdom? And in that sense, there is a mirroring. There are characters outside of us, and there are characters within us. Now, what is the goal? As Smriti ji said, padchinna, avatar aate hain और पदचिन्ह छोड़ जाते हैं, तो हमें क्या करना है? उन पदचिन्हों पे चलना है with effort. कैसे चलेंगे? कैसे चलेंगे? By decoding, uncovering, and understanding the examples. These are the most powerful examples because they've survived millennia.
Correct.
We are still talking. We are still talking about Karan. We are talking about Yudhishthir. We talk about Eklavya. We talk about Drona. We talk about Draupadi. We are still talking about them. Why? Because they are examples par excellence. And what they have actually, their footsteps, what they have left, the reason why they are par excellence is because these are very complex footprints, very, very complex footprints. And that is the mirroring that, happens within us. So where is the Draupadi in me? Where is the Eklavya in me? Where is the Shakuni in me? Where is the Krishna in me? Where is the Arjuna in me? And am I able to effortfully walk these footsteps that the avatars have left so that I too can come into being? Humans can come into being. Because realization of godhood in Sanatani, from the Sanatani perspective, is not restricted to the few. It's available to us all. And this is not the only lifetime available. फिर आएंगे, फिर आएंगे, फिर आएंगे. वहाँ पहुँच नहीं जाए.
Can I just ask one question? I have a feeling we may need to get to questions now, but I just need to ask Smriti ji one question. When we talk about all of these things, there's a certain sense of nostalgia as though, well, there was a time like this. There were these great examples that were set up for us to follow, but the times have changed and things are different now. Does one feel that even more when you're out there battling the political field? And does it feel even more distant? And I suppose, Amish, you're also working in a public space. I suppose Bhavna and I are the lucky ones who tend to write and publish and do other things in a very different sphere. We don't have to encounter the world in the same way. How do you then relate to these things? Are there moments in your own lives when you stop and draw inspiration or solace from the past in this way? Both of you, if you could.
I think it makes you more empathetic. It makes you more creative. Because if you look at policy making, if you look at politics only from the prism of being a pencil pusher, then do you do true justice to your karma? So even to truly do justice to the position or the responsibility you have, you need to sit down and first reflect on the opportunity you've received to serve. And I think that both Mahabharata and Ramayana teach you how to understand service. The way Ramayana tells you what service is, it has a context from it looks at the family responsibility from a Raj Dharma perspective. But when you look at Raj Dharma for Ram and you look at the Raj Dharma of Yudhishthir, you can actually differentiate very clearly between various concepts of how rule has to not be imposed, but how justice has to be served for people at large. I think that when you look at modern day policy making or politicking, reflections on these epics or Mahabharata or Gita or Ramayana, it makes you more empathetic because you recognize that everybody takes a position because of circumstances, because of experiences, and because of consequences they seek for themselves. There has to be a difference between how we see people respond in Kali Yuga and how they were in Treta Yuga or for that matter Sat Yuga. So everybody, when they congregate together in, let's say, politics or policy making, they come with their own desire for consequences they seek. So I think when you are in a position to administer, you have to balance that desire that those who participate in decision making with you with the larger goal for the people of the country. But at the end of the day, it even teaches you how to politely say no.
Okay.
Because as the writers say, there is a price of anger. People always remember how you made them feel. People always remember how sharp your rebuke was. So I think as you grow older, when they say the more you read your Shastras, your Gita, it just makes your words forceful, however, weaves in a sense of empathy. So that even if people hear a no from you, they know that they need to better their proposals to you or better their positions to you, and you will still give them a second chance to hear them out. So I think if you're asking me from a context of an administrator, I think this is the impact that I see.
Well, that's terrific, actually. I mean, empathy is the one thing everybody seeks from a public figure, no question. Amish, do you respond in any different way, or would you agree with this?
No, I would, and I mean, I'm technically a part of the bureaucracy right now. I'm not a bureaucrat, but for a short period, I'm a temporary bureaucrat. One of the things that one learns is being a politician or an administrator in India is actually one of the most difficult jobs in the world. When many Westerners, when they look at India, they don't understand the sheer scale of India. There are more people in India than all of North America, all of Europe, all of Middle East combined. Prime ministers of countries that they speak of as role models to India manage a lower population than a bloc president, in India. So like a part of a district. Just the scale that Indian politicians, Indian administrators have to deal with. I saw the High Commission out here during the first lockdown in UK when we were managing many of the people going back and supporting Indians stuck here. Again, just the sheer scale of India makes any task so complex, so and you're forced to learn which is actually good. And as an author, it's really good because you engage with so many different characters. That's all, inspiration for future characters. So,
Right.
so in that sense, this is good.
Okay.
I think, Karthika, if you allow me to just add, you see, when you see our response in COVID as a nation, as a government, what was the first thing people overseas said about India? 130 crore ka desh hai, 1.3 billion people. How many will go hungry? And what was the first response of Indians and the government? Ki koi raat ko bhuka nahi soega. Now that is a philosophy of life, which you see in our country. There are temples, and there are many tweets about it, of temple caretakers coming out and asking on the road, is anybody hungry, so that we can feed you. And that is principally a culture in India, which then you see reflected in administration, in policy making, or even as society coming together. Langar hoga, ya phir mandir hoga, ya phir masjid hoga. People are actually coming forward and saying, yes, this is the Indian way of life.
Very true.
Mumbai mein jab flood hua tha, Indians came out and said, let's help each other. So I think that is also a part of Dharma, which is not restricted to yourself, but which helps you serve society at large.
Very true. Very true. I've seen, just to give you one more example, I saw bureaucrats out here at the High Commission. I know it's very easy to, it's very easy to criticize administrators, and yes, often it is deserved. But let me give you one example. So many old people were stuck out here. Whenever any old person travels, they travel with their medicines, right? They were running out of their medicines. They didn't have prescriptions. They didn't have replacement for those medicines. Now, here the country, the administrators could have said, yeah, what can I do in this? There were bureaucrats out here who figured out some doctor would give them a replacement, prescription. An Indian doctor who was willing to help, in this lockdown, Indian origin British doctor. They found, this is just one example of many of the bureaucrats out here going above and beyond to help. And a large part of it, I think, is our Indian culture. This is what Dharma is, that you help each other.
Essentially, you're pointing to the best of what we can get from the epics, and you're telling us how, by using them, by drawing on these inspirations, we can actually make our own lives and everybody else's lives around us better. I suppose if that's really the summing up of the book as we would like to see happening. But I think there are questions coming up, so let me kind of see what there is that you might want to address. Okay, here's a question. In the conflict between Durga and Mahishasura, do we just see the fight between good and evil, or is there a nuanced philosophy behind it? Is it a conflict of two different beliefs? Who wants to take this?
Interesting. Sorry, should I?
Yeah, go ahead. I'd like to add after that.
Yeah, because, one of the things is we see Asuras through the prism of Amarchita Katha comics in the modern day. And Amarchita Katha comics are delightful, but they're not part of our scriptures. And our ancestors saw Asuras and Devas also as nuanced. Mahabali, for example, was an Asura, but he was a very noble king. Prahlad, his father was Hiranyakashipu, and Prahlad was, was therefore technically an asura, but he was very noble. And there were devas who did things which they shouldn't have done. And one of the things that's often forgotten is that devas and asuras were cousins. They were both descendants of Saptarishi Kashap. So India did not have, to the point that Smriti ji made earlier of seeing things in nuanced. This gods and demons is a very loaded modern English words. It's not the way our ancients looked at it. And this thing again of seeing asuras as green-skinned and with horns, again, that's not the way they're described in the ancient tales. Again, one has to see how Ma Durga and Mahishasur was. Mahishasur using his power for excess, right? In a way similar to Ravan. And ultimately, then when even the gods couldn't defeat him, as often happens in Indian traditions, you go to the mother, you go to the sacred feminine to save all of us. That's what the battle was about. But to see it very simplistically, asuras all bad, devas all good. No, that's not the way our ancients looked at it. Mahishasur specifically, yes, committed a lot of crimes. Excess. He committed excess because of his power, and Durga had to do what she had to do to restore balance.
Right.
So there is a reason, Karthika, why I'm the only politician amongst the four of us. Because to this question is a political subtext, which possibly got missed by everybody. But if you reflect back to my speech in Parliament years ago, so this is why this question has been put up, so that I can give a particular answer, and then that can be juxtaposition in front of my political speech. So my compliments to whoever has positioned this question for not doing such a subtle job of it.
I completely missed it. Sorry.
No problem. Like I said, that's why I'm the politician amongst the four of us. But let me say this. While Amish looked at the Amar Chitra Kathafication of Asurs and everything else, in today's narrative, the phrase nuanced philosophy is often used to demean religious beliefs in the guise of nuanced philosophy. And I think that is why you speak about conflicts in two different beliefs. So while everybody is free to philosophize, nuanced or not so nuanced, one needs to recognize that you cannot demonize Durga for taking a position that she did. No, I'm talking about the political subtext of this question. The poser will understand why I'm saying this. So what we have to be very careful of, that while we oscillate in our deliberations and dialogues, we cannot use the term nuanced philosophy as a crutch to have these kind of conflicting debates. And I know why I'm saying this, to demean the stature of Durga. So my position as a believer in Durga, in Shakti, is very clear. There is nothing nuanced about good bringing evil to death. That is the Dharma. That is the karma for which Durga came to such a pass. And my appeal is that in nuanced philosophies, we do not digress and bring in political subtexts, which is easy for Purane Chawal like me to catch.
But it's really interesting, isn't it? It proves the point that the epics live on in every moment of our lives almost, whether it's in Parliament or here.
Oh, absolutely.
I remember
weaponization of it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. No,
this is one such instance.
No, I remember this because this was something I remember one of the rare times I'd gotten into a Twitter spat as well, because someone had told me of some bizarre JNU pamphlet, and thank you for reminding me of that, where it was saying Mahishasur as a hero and Durga. It was just that pamphlet was bizarre in its ways, and I was like, what text are you referring to? What nonsense is this? So yeah, that I.
Okay, so we will not go that direction. Then we'll go to the next question, shall we? I'm from JNU, na, to thoda mere ko bolne mein problem ho raha hai ye sab.
That was from some Marxist handbook of Hinduism.
Next question. What is Dharma? Is it a manifestation that is real or the embodiment of being ideal? Okay, I suppose it's between the concept of real and ideal.
Just my two bits. I think it is the manifestation of beliefs which are lessons from the past, which can be structured for serving a better cause in the present, and which can prepare us better for the future. It is embodiment of the desire to be ideal. What is ideal is the question.
Yeah, and it's a changing ideal. It's not the same for everyone or everyone's mind. Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next one. It says, this is clearly to Amish. It says, once a character from your book said, there is your truth and my truth. As for the universal truth, it does not exist. However, Dharma provides us truths which are to be followed by all. How?
Yeah, so in fact, I remember this conversation. It was a part of the Shiva trilogy, I believe. And this line is actually from Nietzsche, who was a German philosopher, but from what one knows was inspired a lot by Eastern philosophy, especially Zoroastrianism. And in fact, if I remember the conversation correctly, the next line in that conversation is that the universal truth does exist. It's just that it's not available for us human beings as yet, right? When we evolve enough and we get moksha, then we will actually be able to grasp. The key thing in this though is what that person says, that if you're philosophically not ready for the universal one truth, forcing it down your throat is usually a path to violence and fanaticism, right? So when we are still, and how do we know we don't know the one universal truth? We're still here, right? Because if we knew it, we would have got moksha. We would have been out of here, right? We would have got released from the cycle of births. So then, therefore, when we are still here, we should respect the multiplicity of truths. So, which means, for one, I, for example, in terms of the divine truth, I'm a very, very devout Lord Shiva worshipper. For me, he is the divine form I worship. But for me to start telling someone else that the god or goddess you worship is false and you're going to go to hell, no, that's fanaticism, right? I shouldn't do that. I must respect someone else's right to worship whichever god or goddess they choose to, just like they must respect my right to worship the god or goddess who I choose.
So I guess that's the thing that he's saying, or he or she, that Dharma is about telling people what to do. There is a universal truth. Your book is actually saying no, there isn't anything.
Dharma is not prescriptive. Dharma is not a list of do's and don'ts. Dharma tells you these are the philosophies, these are the complexities. Learn viveka, learn the ability, and then make your own choice, and then live with the consequences. So Dharma actually treats you like an adult. And once we get released from the cycle of births, once we get moksha, then we will be divine. We will be with one truth.
Okay. So here's another question about karma, dharma, punarjanma, and moksha. And the connection between them is what we want to know about. This seems like a really large question, but feel free to answer.
Didi.
Gosh. Where do you start?
Yeah, you can start with me.
So, really, dharma makes no sense unless you believe in punarjanma, because through karma, you attain dharma over lifetimes. We are, in this effort and in this chain, and once we attain moksha, it's all done. We've reached self-realization. If you can approach this question from the Purusharthas, Dharma, Artha, Kam, Moksha. So, and I would like to connect it to the Shreyas and Preyas of the Upanishads. So Shreyas, let us say in a very, very simplified way, is goodness. And Prayas is pleasure, the pursuit of pleasure. Now, in the Purusharthas, if you scaffold Artha and Kama, let's categorize them as the pleasure domain. If you scaffold them and foundation them within Dharma, goodness is the foundation. Now you build your Artha and your Kama. If you're able to do that, then moksha is a possibility. If you take away Dharma, which is goodness, from the equation, then actually Artha and Kama can completely lead you astray. And there is no moksha possible.
Then you're stuck in Maya. You're just stuck in that cycle.
Nothing wrong with pleasure.
But I want to go back to what you said about punarjanma and karma. Isn't that also a way in which people have sort of taken away their sense of responsibility and said ki yaar is janam mein to ye kar liya, agle janam mein dekh lenge? Yeah, this is all because of last birth, you know, your caste, your life, your difficulties.
This is mostly husbands, Karthika.
Really? Okay, so you, the wife, tell us what you think about that punarjanma angle.
Kill me now.
So wives always say सात जन्मों का साथ हो, and husband says कि ये जन्म काफी है.
But seriously,
I think the fact that punarjanma gives you an opportunity to redeem yourself.
Yeah.
It gives you an opportunity. I go back again, that if your cells are an imprint of your psychological impact of births and memories emanate from that, then it is a chance to redeem yourself. When Dharma teaches you, and let's talk about a superstition. Some of the biggest scientific minds can come through, go for a little drive, or Kali Billi rasta kaatti hai. Now Dharma says, tumko to science pata hai. Something in you triggers that superstition.
Yeah.
Then you want to do a selective bibliography as to why that superstition emanated in the first place in that instant. So I think that, as Amish has said in the beginning of his comments, it's complicated. But I think it has been made complicated so that we are forever learners. Today there is a concept of lifelong learning. But lifelong learning was very much the center of our Dharma. And that is why it's not a checklist. It is various stages of reflection, various stages of looking at that knowledge and rediscovering self. So with each janma, you rediscover new possibilities, new realms. You discover a path to redeem yourself. And it is when you remember how much you need to redeem that you can truly come to a stage or a birth cycle where you are purely on that path to moksha.
No.
Do you think we're living in a time when there is a perceived need to go back and look at these texts and these concepts? I mean, it feels to me from the publishing point of view, for instance, that it's only in the last decade or so that we've started seeing a lot more writing and, you know, people coming up and talking about these subjects.
Responsible for it.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I tell you
That's
why.
a good comment made. But
I'll tell you why. There was a time in our culture where if you listen to a Hindi film song, you were either debauched or illiterate. And slowly Hindi film songs, nobody was ashamed of embracing them. Why? Because हिंदुस्तान में और हिंदी गाना सुनना है, तमिल गाना सुनना है, तो उसमें कोई शर्म नहीं होनी चाहिए. Similarly, there was a time where if your bookshelf had a single Hindi or Indian author, people would hide it in some crevice. And it's when Amish came with Meluha, I remember, it became the chic thing to do, to have an Indian author on your bookshelf.
Yeah.
So I think that he's partly responsible, part responsibility I give to the publisher or the editor or his support team, because we all know that it's not easy somebody to manage a job and penmanship. But I think it's an amalgamation of all those forces together that it became chic to have a book published, became extremely successful because the content was great, and then became the cyclic event where there have been many writers who philosophize because they are known as Indian writers on poverty and how bad things have been. Amish has never sold the poverty of India. He has sold the spiritual riches. And I think that's what made many Indians proud to pick up that book.
Thank you.
As Amish's publishers, we are very happy you said that, and we hope that more books will be written and read. One last question, if we can take, which was about Icarus. That is actually one of the first stories in the book as well. And the question is, one of the promotional images was about Icarus. Are there any other foreign epics you have explored in the book? Bhavna, you want to take this?
Yes, we have.
Icarus, and you also have Isis.
Yes, a little bit Egypt. Yes, we have inadequately. We are hoping, to write more books where we will cover other ancient, I will not hesitate to call them dharmic cultures. As Amish says, we are the only pre-Bronze Age, ancient civilizational dharmic approach to spiritualism which has survived. There were many. Ancient Egypt, there was, Greece, Rome, Native Americans, Japan. Japan is still substantially, there. Of course, not pre-Bronze Age. And we do intend to dip our, toe into, those streams of learning as well. In this, we have sort of touched upon it, but it's substantially, the Indian dharmic, stories from Mahabharata and Amish's universe. That's, I would say the.
And if I can add to what Didi said, I would agree that in terms of approach to wisdom, the ancient Greco-Roman culture, ancient Egyptian culture, ancient Mesopotamian culture, many of these other cultures are actually dharmic in their approach. They may not have used that term, dharma, but it's very, and one can feel a sense of kinship with them. And Goddess Saraswati can bless anyone, anyone anywhere in the world. If someone has been blessed with wisdom, then we should learn from that someone. That's what we've tried to do in this book.
Right. So we have 1 minute left, and I thought it'd be good if we could wrap up with each of you maybe giving your last sort of thought on the subject of Dharma.
Or each of us holding the book up. Shameless marketing. No such thing as too much marketing.
Let's all hold up the book. Here it is. So then now you can go and say what you have to say as well before they shut us down.
Before they shut us down. No, yes. Firstly, Smriti ji, thank you so much for coming here and taking time out of a very, very busy schedule. Thank you so much for all the support you've given to all my books, and thank you so much for the very kind words that you said. Truly touched my heart. Thank you. And this book, Karthika, you've been a part of this from the very beginning, but this book is truly special to me because Bhavna Didi and I wrote it together. She's a part of my soul, my elder sister, and delighted that we have written a book together, and we will, Lord Shiva's blessings, write many, many more together.
I would like to, offer heartfelt, thank yous to Smriti ji. Smriti ji, I balked when you called me Bhavna ji. You are an Indian icon. Please call me Bhavna. I crawled with, there were ants crawling all over me with embarrassment. Thank you so much for having, been here and graced this occasion. This is really a very, very humble effort from Amish and me, delving into such huge concepts like Dharma and Karma. We are not experts. We really are, this is a stumbling kind of an effort. And I pray that, you receive, the readers receive something from it. Karthika, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being, just being what you are.
Smriti, the politician, always has the last word. Here,
So this is the only time people will get to hear Karthika call me Smriti ji. I'm grateful to both Amish and Bhavna for ensuring that she does so. Knowing Karthika, the amount that I do, I think authors are better writers, courtesy editors such as Karthika. Though the publishing house is extremely established and celebrated, I think that these are the contributions that go unnoticed when books such as these are published. So I think the authors would agree that the team behind which puts together such a beautiful manuscript needs equal amount of compliments. I think, Bhavnaji, the amount of research that has gone in is something that I'd like to compliment. Because when you look at a book such as this, which, like I said, contextualizes your research from a very simplistic narrative, it's rare, and I'm mentioning this again, to find a selected bibliography for it. I think that keen attention to that detail is something that I'd like to compliment from a very, very structural point of view of the book. And as far as Amish goes, I'm hopeful that your books continue to create conversations, because those books that limit that knowledge only to the pages on which they are inscribed end up killing the conversation. You keep those conversations alive, and that is what makes you a celebrated author. So my best wishes to the Bhai or Behan team. Congratulations to the publishers, and well done, Karthika. One more feather under your cap.
And we'll hold it up again.
Yeah, they want a photograph, like a launch. So do you mind? One last photograph.
We are holding it very diligently. So
I think
we have it now.
Okay, we have it. Thank you very, very much. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you have too, and that lots of people who are listening and those who are going to listen, I think you caught a lot of people here in a fairly candid mode, which I think is not all that usual. So thank you again, everyone.
Congratulations.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.